Hello everyone. As in this lecture series, today we will discuss about the our ninth topic, that is the API security. Right. In the previous classes, we discussed about the different things. That is the introduction to cybersecurity threats, vulnerabilities, risk management, security frameworks, threat modeling, and let we understood about the IAM, that is the identity access management, then access control, different method, RBAC, ABAC, DAC, different things. Then we came to know about the cryptographic concepts and history, how it came to in picture like ciphertext. And then we understood about the private key, that is symmetric cryptography. Then we understood about the public key and the asymmetric cryptography. In last class, we discussed about the web application security, right? And also we understood about the Open Worldwide Application Security Project. Open Worldwide Application Security Project and top 10 things to understand how the token and these things happen and how to secure those, the web application security. Today class will understand about the API security. Okay, what is the meaning of API here? If we discuss about the API, that is nothing but application programming interface. Okay, that is nothing but application programming interface. Application, then programming, okay, and then interface. Okay, then interface. That is just a full form. Okay, that is just a full form, and we will discuss about the what is API, then what kind of threats are there, and why we need a security. You will understand about that. Okay, so this is nothing but, I will remove that an API is nothing but is a way for one piece of software. This is a way. We will discuss example also. I'm just giving a definition now, easy definition. This is a kind of a way, okay, for one piece of software to interact with another piece of software. This is one piece of software to interact with another piece of software, right? Okay, there's a way to one the way how one piece of software will interact with the another piece of software, right? If a program or application has an API, right? If a program or application has an API, external clients can request service from it, right? If any program or application has an API, that means external clients can request services from it, like a weather app. We will see the example. Okay. Now, what are the API security? Okay. Now, what the API security? API security is the process of protecting APIs from attacks. Okay. Now, after understanding just a basic thing we are talking now. So API security is the protecting APIs from attacks, right? Just as application network and servers can be subjects to attack, right? So what happens? So when API server or networks, any application network and servers fall in attack, that's maybe the APIs can be fall in a victim position to a number of different threats. So API security is a core component of web application security. That's why we are understanding API security after the web application security. Okay, so most modern web application relies on APIs to function. Okay, most modern web application relies on APIs. Okay, so APIs introduce additional risk to an application by allowing outside, because API, what happen, external, as we discussed in definition, external client, right? External client. So it welcomes a threat only. So what happened? API introduces additional risk only to an application by allowing outside parties to access it. One comparison is a business that opens its office to the public, like that. Having more people on the premises, some of whom may be unknown to the business employees, introduces a greater risk. Similarly, an API allows outsider to use and program, introduce a more risk to the API services infrastructure. Okay, that I hope we understood. Now let's talk what we will discuss in this chapter and how we will proceed for this chapter. Okay, so we go about the next slide. We'll cancel it and we go to next slide. What the objective at the end of this unit? we will understand about the role of the secure practice in developing software and database, right? What is the role of secure practice? Role of secure practicing, okay? Learn web application vulnerabilities and the common exploits, okay? That means kind of what are the weak things are there that can be exploited by the threats. We will understand API vulnerabilities also. We will check analyze threats to various application environments. Then later we will understand robust security measures in web application context. Okay, let's go to the understand. So after this, explain security requirement in software and database development will be understood. APIs and client server communication will be understood. Identify common vulnerabilities and threats in web application, mobile application, and distributed software. And defensive mechanism against the said attacks will be understood. Okay. First, we will talk about the introduction to APIs, as I already discussed the few basic points. Then we will go to the API calls and endpoints. Then we will discuss about the security risks of API. Okay. Then later we will go to the finally mitigation risk. Okay. We'll talk about the mitigation risk as well. Okay. So these things we will discuss slowly. Okay. In one by one. Let's see the first. So what is an API? Okay. Okay. So an application program. So now I will discuss with the help of talking. Okay. So let's see. Okay. Here an API is a application programming interface. That is just we say the API is a set of rules. Okay. That is nothing but as a set of rules which determines how one software program can access the data or functionality provided by another software program that we already discussed, right? So it's a set of rules that allow different software applications to communicate with each other. Suppose this is the one application software, one application software. The second application software, how they will second application software. Okay. How they will communicate? They will allow to communicate by using the different set of rules through the API, right? So API is a set of rules that allow different software applications to communicate with each other. Right now, APIs help system exchange data and services without exposing internal code. Okay. Now, API, what does help systems exchange data and services without exposing internal code. So only data transfer without exposing internal code. Okay, without the internal code. Okay, I hope you understood, right? Okay, so let's see. They are used in a widely variety of context, including web development, mobile app, Internet of Things. Okay, for the few application, they are used in a wide variety of contexts, including web development, mobile apps, and Internet of Things. Okay. Now, API acts is a key point if we talk. API act as a bridge between applications. So this is one application, this is second application. This is connecting the 2 points. They allow integration between software system. API are widely used in web application, mobile apps, cloud computing, IoT devices, right? Okay. So these are the given example. Now we will talk one example later on, the weather app example, okay? So that we will understand clearly of the API. See that. What happened when a weather app shows the live weather data? Okay? Weather app shows the live weather data. Okay, weather app shows the shows the what? Live weather data. Okay, live weather data. It uses the weather API. What it uses? Weather API. Weather API to fetch information from a remote server. To fetch information from the remote server. So fetch information from the server. It use the weather API. Okay. So what happened? That's the way. Like see, access the app to check the weather information. User wants the information from the weather app. Now what weather app does through the weather API that takes the information from the server and gives to the user. So get request from the weather data, get the weather data and give to the user. Like that this works. So API request response API request and response flow diagram. We can see the simple example of API, how it works. Okay, it is like kind of a suppose one city is there, kind of packer and movers, we can say, simple way. Suppose one city is there, we are moving the another city, somebody is asking the request, and someone is helping to give the data from some other important sources. Okay, so if we talk about the different types of API, those are the open API. Open, we will discuss about that. Open APIs, internal APIs, partner APIs, okay, and the REST APIs. Okay, we'll discuss more about it. Okay, okay. Let's see now next slides after the example. Okay, how does an API work? Now, what example we have seen, so that we can understand how does an API work. See, a client send a request to the API server, usually over the internet or local network. Suppose in mobile there is a weather app, so we are requesting, suppose, data, weather data from the Delhi or from the US or from the some Washington DC, anyway, from the London, United Kingdom, anywhere. So request is made using a specific protocol such as HTTP or HTTPS, okay, whatever. Then, and include the information about the operation the client wants to perform, retrieving data or updating a resources. The API server receives the request and processes it. It may validate the request, authenticate the client, okay, then authorize the request or perform other necessary operations. Okay. API server send or response back to the client, which may include data, an error message, or a status code indicating the result of the operation. The client receives the response and process it. Okay, the same thing what we discussed. This is the things. This is between, and this is asking. This is getting, and this is asking, and this is finally getting done. So we go like this. Now let's see the next. So through the example, we understood how does the API or how does an API work. What are the API calls? Okay, what are the API calls means? An API call is a request made to an API to access data from functionality. A client makes an API call and send a request to the API server, and server sends back a response request. The request and response use a specific format and structure, and are transmitted using a specific protocol such as HTTP or HTTPS. An API endpoint is a specific location on a server which can receive and respond to API request. An API endpoint is identified by a URI, uniform resource identifier, and is typically associated with a particular API or service. So here we understood the few key points: request, okay, response, double R, okay, response, then letter, endpoint, that means server point, and then URI, uniform resource identifier, okay? And kind of the specific format, that is kind of HTTP or HTTPS, right? So specific format, okay? These are the few key points we understood related to APIs, okay? Let's see, delete about, okay, now let's go to the next slide. So if we discuss about the common HTTP method, so it's written, right, HTTP method. So what are the common HTTP method? Because it is not mentioned here, so we can write common HTTP method is a get, post, okay, get, post, put, and delete. Okay, so this is all saying get means retrieve the data, post means create new data, put means update existing data, and delete means remove data. These are the common HTTP methods. Okay, HTTP method. I hope we are understanding it together. Okay. Now, what happened? We understood about the different things. So what happened? API calls and endpoints. So API call what? API does a call. So an API call is a request sent by a client, and request sent by a client to a server asking for a specific data or a service. That's called a API call. Endpoint means an endpoint is a URL where an API can be accessed, right? So API call and API endpoint. These are the few important components for the API process or API the call. Okay. I hope we are understanding it. Okay. What happened? The API response. API response means what? The server usually respond in a API response means getting a response from the API, but is generally respond in a JSON format. Okay, JSON. I hope we are understanding about it. Okay, so we understood about the different key points and how API calls, endpoint, and the response works. Okay, now let's go to the next point. I hope we are getting the point. Let's remove this also. Okay, okay. So now there are different APIs, open APIs, internal APIs, partner API, REST APIs, right? Open APIs mean publicly available, kind of a apps, right? Used internal APIs means kind of a used within organization. Partner APIs means shared with a business partner. REST API means most common web APIs using for the HTTP methods. Okay. Now important things we have to understand about the because we are understanding about the API security, right? Why we need the security? Because there is a risk of the security, right? There are threats. So first we have to understand security risk. What kind of risk are there? That's why we need a security. First we understand about the risk, then what kind of securities are needed that we can discuss. Okay, so what the security risks are there? We talk about the first security risk, broken authentication. Okay, first security risk is broken authentication. Broken authentication. Okay, important security risk. So now vulnerability exploit. A vulnerability is exploited when an attacker sends specially crafted data at a target, data that takes advantage of a flaw in the target construction. These flaws, known as a vulnerabilities, okay, can give the attackers various unintended access to an API for its corresponding applications. Okay, if an exploit target vulnerabilities, that means the kind of a weak things or valuable things or the those can be attacked easily. That was previously unknown. This is called a zero-day threat. Such threats are extremely difficult to stop. Okay, so this kind of a risk. Also, I told important risk is a broken authentication. Okay, broken authentication. That means attackers may access account using stolen credentials. Okay. Second is the data exposure. Data exposure. Data exposure. This is another one. Vulnerability exploit and the day threats. Further, broken authentication. That means kind of a stolen credentials. Data exposure means sensitive information may be leaked due to poor security control. Okay, data exposure. That means important or sensitive information are going to be leaked. Injection attack. Malicious code inserted like kind of SQL attack, right? Structured query language attack is inserted into a API request. That's kind of SQL injection or the command injection. Okay. Other threats can be a broken access control. That means your authentication and authorization is disturbed. Your authorization is disturbed. That means broken access control. Your control whom to give or whom to use is disturbed. Okay, denial of service, DOS. Okay, or the distributed denial of service, DDoS. Okay, that happen what? Attackers develop APIs with excessive request causing service disruption. That means excessive request. What happened? Excessive request. So what happens? Server will be overloaded and service disruption will be happen. And important thing is that data transmitted without the HTTPS. That means kind of lack of encryption or the security that can be intercepted. Okay. Now I hope we understood different vulnerabilities or the risk. Different risk. What kind of risk are there? The risk is broken access control, like kind of broken authentication, data exposure, injection attacks, zero-day threats, vulnerabilities, different exploits, these kind of things. Vulnerability exploit by a denial of service, lack of encryptions, okay, broken access control, injection attack, data exposure, broken authentication. Okay. Now let's see the next slides. Okay, that we already discussed. Okay, denial of service and distributed denial of service. Okay, security risk, we understood the two things, right? That exploitation happen, zero-day threats happen, and many things I already discussed in the previous slide. That broken authentications, okay, authorization, that means access control, denial of service or distributed denial of service. So we can study again this, we can read it again as I explained previously only before coming to slides, so that when we see the slides we can get the we can have a previous listened knowledge. So when we read, it will be actually get in the mind directly, right? So clients need to be authenticated before they can make APIs requests, so that API server does not accept requests from unknown or legitimate sources. So what happen? Authentication based attack happen. Unknown things can be go inside. Authorization error means determines the level of access of user is authorizations, right? Properly. So it's a kind of authentication and authorization distributed, that's excessive. Okay, and some attackers will direct a glut of requests and API on purpose and a denial of service or distributed denial of service attack. Okay, that we already discussed. Now let's understand the solution. Important thing is a mitigation strategies. Okay, we understood about the what we understood. We understood about the different attacks. Different attacks we understood. Okay, what understood different attacks. But now what we understood, what we need to understood, mitigation strategy. Mitigation strategy. Mitigation strategy. Now we understand the risk. Now we need to know the security. Because the topic is what? Topic is what? API, API security, right? So in the API security, we understood the word API, how API works, endpoint, calling, response, these things we understood, right? We understood HTTP method, JSON, many things, right? Then we understood what the risk, so that we need a security. Okay. Now let's talk mitigation strategy or the solution or the security, how to do. Let's talk the mitigation strategy. Okay. If we talk about the mitigation strategy, how many mitigation strategies are there? Or what is the solution from the risk or the threats? Okay. Let's see the different solution or mitigation strategy. So one is the authenticated and authorization. As the lack of authentication or broken authentication, broken access control can give a problem. So we should need a proper authentication and authorization. Okay, and authorization. Okay, I hope you understand. We understand it. So we can use the OAuth 2.0. Okay, JWT token. Okay, also we can use the multi-factor authentication. Okay, that things we can use. Also, next mitigation strategy is use the HTTPS encryption, not only HTTPS encryption, so that there is a properly encrypted things and the communication will be encrypted. That's why we understood the cryptography, right? So we need an encrypted communication, so that we need a HTTPS. Okay, properly understood. Now we need to verify the input validation. Input validation. Input validation. Input validation. Okay. So if we verify the input, that means we can prevent the injection attack, common injection or command injection or SQL injection. Input validation means injection attack will be mitigated. Okay. Next, if we talk about the next is rate limiting. That means we are restricting the number of API requests per user to prevent DOS attack, right? To prevent the DOS or DDoS attack, we are making the rate limit. We are making the rate limit. We can make the rate limit. That means restrict the number of APIs requests per users to prevent the DOS attack. Okay, that's called a rate limit. What is called rate limit. Okay, rate limiting. Now, next mitigation strategy is, I think we are understanding properly it. So DDoS saving, authorization saving, authentication saving, and exploitation saving. We are covered it, right? Now, one more mitigation strategy is API gateway. API gateway. That gateway can happen what? Gateway will be through the gateway. What will be done? Gateway. What will be done? Traffic management, authentication, and monitoring. That is important. Monitoring. Okay. So that's should be needed. API gateway. Next would be logging and monitoring. So that means session monitoring should be there. Session monitoring. So that is a logging and monitoring. So continuously monitor the API activities for suspicious behavior is important. For suspicious behavior. Okay. I hope we are understanding it. Okay, so logging and monitoring. Okay, so if we want to understand something, we have to synchronize four important things: listening, reading, writing, and speaking. So I am speaking. Okay, when you listen this lecture, so you can listen and speak and read, and while you write also. Those are the important things to understand any topic. Okay, so last, if we understand more about it, we can understand the more mitigation strategy. There's a security testing also needed. Security testing. Few important points I mentioned, and which are not mentioned, we discussed via discussion, right? Speaking and writing. Few are mentioned already, so reading is there, right? Security testing can be the another mitigation strategy. Okay, so that's kind of a penetration testing. Penetration, that means perform the before using perform the penetration testing, like involve the any different kind of attacks or threats and mitigate that threats by using the prevent penetration testing. Vulnerability assessment and security audits. Time to time audits should be there. Audit means time to time. Monitoring means continuous. Okay. Monitoring means CCTV. Auditing means time to time teacher is checking your answer scripts or the midterm, main term, something like that. So that's called audit. Okay. Now I hope we understand about the different risk. We understand about the APIs, different risk, APIs, how it works, right? What kind of risk, so that we need a security, and what kind of securities can be performed or mitigation strategy can be performed. So we understood can we mitigate by performing check, converting user, right? Converting user input to harmless plain text. Okay, that means kind of encryption, authentication, authorization, and kind of making the like proper rate limiting to secure the DDoS. So if I talk in one time, so we need a authentication authorizations, okay, HTTP encryptions, input validations, rate limiting, and the API gateways, logging and monitoring, and the regular security checking. Okay, this is for rate limiting, authentication, authorization. So for the access control and for the identity control, okay, and this performing the safe and harmful data, converting all user to harmless plaintiffs. That's the HTTPS. Okay, kind of those things. Okay, needed to secure the API. That's called a API security and how to conform. Okay, so if we say in the final words, APIs are essential for modern software communication, but they also introduce a security challenge. Okay, proper authentication, okay, encryption, encryption, monitoring, okay, monitoring, and security practices. Security practices means what? Penetration testing, vulnerability assessment, security audits, okay, help can help, okay, and security practicing or practices can help to protect the APIs from the cyber threats and ensure secure data exchange between the two application software. Okay, secure the data exchange. Okay, I hope it's clear now what is API, what is an API, how it works. Okay, what are the risks. Okay, what are the examples. Okay, then that or that how to mitigate the risk. Okay, I hope these things are understood properly. Okay. Okay. So we got to know about the APIs completely, like important things completely. API is a broad category. If we go more details, it will take long time. And if you understood the basic things from here, then definitely you can read more depth, right? Many examples, more in depth. Okay, it can be go on so on, right? So now, if we talk about this, so now what I will do, I will show you the all slides from first. What I did, I explained from first to last. Now we will go one by one, last to first. So it will be revised. So it's kind of a summary. We will revise, and lastly, I will discuss a few important points what we discussed through this lecture, and then we will conclude the class. Okay. Okay. So we understood about the different mitigation strategy or solution from the risk. So we have a risk. So that's we need a different kind of solution. Okay. I hope that is understood. Then later, what are the risks are there? We understood those are the risk, right? So we understood different broken authentication, right? Broken authorization, injection attack, data exposure, broken access control, denial of service, lack of encryptions are the main risks, okay? And vulnerability exploitations and the zero-day threats, right? This if an exploit target a vulnerability that was previously unknown, this is called a zero-day threats. Such threats are extremely difficult to stop, okay? What are API calls? We understood the request, response, right? Specific format, that is a HTTP, different method of the method of HTTP we understood, that is a get, post, put, delete, that we understood. We understood about the API endpoint, uniform resource identifiers. Okay. How does an API works? Client send a request, API receives, API server receive the things, API server send a response back, and then client receive the response according to the full process by the encryption and properly authorization and authentication. Okay. How it works, we have seen the example also. User requesting, give the user requesting through the app, go the request to the server, getting the data and giving to the users so that they can see on the app, right? So what is an API? We understood an API is a nothing but it's a programming interface, right? Commonly sought into API is a set of rules which determines how one software program can access the data or functionality provided by the another software program. So for the two software program making an exchange of data or communication kind of a things developed by a programming things, right? That developed to make sure that exchanges data is going on between the two application software, okay, securely. So we understood the different things, APIs, APIs called endpoint, security risk of API, mitigation strategies. What we learned through that, security requirement, understood the client server communication, different vulnerabilities, threats, web application, mobile application, and distributed software, and kind of the things. What are the risks and how to mitigate those kind of risks? That's kind of the defensive mechanism against the said attacks. Okay. So we understood the API. Okay. We understood the different kind of how it works. We understood the different kind of vulnerabilities, and we understood the different kind of threats. Then we understood the risk through that all, and finally we understood the defensive mechanism against those risks. Okay. Objective we cleared. What are the objective from this all studies? We covered the all objective what we discussed. Okay. And now we come to the our first slides. Okay. So what we discussed today, just in a first we go from first to last and then revise from the last to first. Now just summarize in a few points. Okay. Then we will finish the lecture. Okay. We will finish the discussion on the lecture. We can say the discussion. Okay. Let's see now. So what is going on here? Today we understood about the API. Okay. What is API? Okay. How it works. How it works. Okay. How it works. Okay. How it works. Okay. What are the different types of APIs? Okay. Then we understood the uh, different kind of HTTP methods. Okay. Then we understood about the what kind of risks are there. So important risk we understood. Then after the important risk for the API or the application programming interface, we after the important risk or the main risk, we understood how to solve those risks or the mitigate those risks. Okay, how to mitigate those risks. For that, because that is important, we are understanding API security. So API and the security, what kind of security needed, that we understood. So important securities are authentication, authorization, use the proper encryption, that is HTTPS. Okay, and we understood the input validation also needed for stopping the injection attack. We understood the rate limiting is needed for the denial of service attack. We understood API gateway needed for the traffic management, authentication, and proper continuous monitoring. Then we understood that we need a logging and monitoring to control or to secure the session. We understood that we need a security testing, that's a kind of audit, and penetration testing and vulnerability assessment. Okay, so these kind of things we understood. I hope you will listen it and you will like it, and if you like, please share to everyone and others. Others can also listen and can feel free to discuss and learn from that, right? This is kind of discussion and learning things, right? And this is like we are focusing on the good learning environment here in the SR University. So this is one of the prominent university in South India. We can say the uh, uh, pan India. We can say like that. Okay. So thank you very much to listen it, and hope you understand and like it. And if you like, please share to everyone. And thank you very much, and have a good day. Thank you.